What do you think of when you say an eye-opening event or experience? Webster would say something startling or surprising or perhaps enlightening. The common theme would be extraordinary. I want to kind of take that as a notion for events in our life that change how we look at the world. Kind of like you go into the optometrist and you're getting eyeglasses or sunglasses and they put different filters in the lens and you look at it and then the whole world is that tint. That's an eye-opening event. When you go through that door, things are different. So I want to share 3 of those eye-opening events in my life. And I want to also look at it from the point of view as when they happen, it seems like they're separate. They happen at different times, different situations, different people. It seems like they're not really connected. But now, as I can look back and say, wait a minute, it seems like there's a pattern there. It seems like something really was meant to happen, and all that variation is really connected. And so it raises that old philosophical question of predestination versus free will. So are there any answers to that? Well, first eye-opening event. It's early 1980s. I'm in my mid-30s. You can do the math. That's, well, let's see. In 5 days, that'll be 68. So that's, and I was raised traditionally. You know, I felt very ordinary. I grew up in high school, college, got married, started a family, had a career in the corporate world. And this particular day, I have a dentist appointment. Get some very traditional fillings replaced. So I show up, and they show me the chair, the chair. And the hygienist comes in, and she's prepping me, the cotton rolls, the rubber band, the milk clamps. And on cue, the dentist comes in, and he's going to hold an ordinary conversation. Now, how are you today, Mr. Swedrock? And as though that was completed normally, he goes about his chore, which is to put some Novocaine in. And while he's waiting for the Novocaine to take effect, he starts telling his story. He was shopping the day before, and he was buying some furniture for his daughter. And in the furniture store, he met a salesman. The salesman had just returned to work after being out for an extended period of time for a cardiac condition. The salesman tells the dentist, while he was in the hospital, his heart stopped. And while his heart was stopped, he had this experience of being out of body and going someplace, and he met beings he recognized as deceased relatives. And they introduced him to others there as also members of the extended family, deceased, that he had no prior knowledge of. Well, so after he was resuscitated and recovered, he went and did the research and authenticated the information he learned for the first time while his heart was stopped. Well, at this point, the dentist just pinched my gum, it's time to go to work. And he does his job and then finishes and leaves, and the hygienist who I had watched listening to this story, and she had just been rigid. You could tell this was totally outside of her comfort zone. And I kind of wanted to reach out and say, I think this is comforting. I don't know. But I was left, as she left, with just question marks in the eyeballs. Where do you go with it? I might have heard that phrase in the early 80s, near-death experience, but it really wasn't on my horizon. I had other things going on. So it was just a seed that was planted, and then years later when I had the opportunity, I was going to hear somebody tell their near-death experience firsthand. I was glued. I was going to be there. So the second eye-opening event, August 1985. I'm in the kitchen of our home washing dishes. I have daughters, 5 and 8. They were playing nearby. My wife is in the area, and the phone rings. And she answers it, hello, and she says, it's your dad, which I knew meant my stepfather. He was my dad from the time I was 6 years old. And it's for you. So she hands me the phone, and he didn't prep me or anything. He just said, the first things I heard, hello, David killed himself. That changes your world. David was my youngest brother, 21 years old. No explanation. Now, if I had any kind of presence or warning, if he said I got bad news, I had something, terrible to share with you, I would put on the face, the cover, trying to protect the reaction for my daughters, maybe help my wife get prepared. Instead, I was totally authentic. I went immediately into total grief, sobbing uncontrollably. And I think in retrospect, that was the best thing to offer them, was the authentic reality. So I got things together and drove the 4 hours back to Pennsylvania where the homestead was, and for the next week I was there just putting things together, answering the phone, accepting meals. What had happened, my brother had come home from a friend's wedding, got a high-powered rifle from the gun cabinet, went up to his bedroom, laid on the bed and put the muzzle under his chin and completed an act of total despair. That little community poured their hearts out to our family. They came and they had cleaned up and everything was taken care of. The ambulance had taken the body. So it was a closed casket service. And after that was over, I returned home and I called and I was talking to my confidant at the time, who was my stepmother. And she says, "You need to say goodbye to your brother." And I realized I had just kind of put that on hold. I was just going through the motions, doing the activities. And so I found some quiet time. I wasn't really a practicing meditator or anything at the time, but I'm alone and reclined in the easy chair. And I thought to myself, I let the thought go through my mind, "Goodbye, David." Instantly, my consciousness was transported back to Pennsylvania, back to the accompanying town where the funeral home was, where the body had been taken, into the back of the funeral home where I'd never been physically, to a casket. This is rather graphic, sitting on a gurney. And my consciousness went through the sidewall of that casket into the space on the torso where there should have been a face and there was just indistinguishable matter. And at the same time I'm bilocating, I'm aware of my body, and back in New York it's just convulsing like an epileptic fit, the horror, the terror, the ghastly nature of this. At the pinnacle, a voice, a male voice comes into my mind, and I know it was not a thought. It was as though there was somebody, I'm alone, but there was 3 feet away. It spoke to me and said, "He's not here." And with that, there was complete calm. I was back unified with my body. And from that moment forward, that's where I began that transition to lose that fear of death. It didn't happen immediately, that fear of the change called death. And so the world took on a different hue at that point. The third episode, a few years after that, it's the late 90s, and I, at the time, was at a church where I worked my way up to the head usher position. And it's early Sunday morning, the teenagers are taking their time, they're not getting ready. And I said, when they're ready, you bring the other car, you come, I got responsibilities. And so I headed out to church. Nobody's on, there's no traffic on the road. This suburb of Rochester, New York. It's 12-mile path, 7 miles practically, due south, hit a stop sign, turn right, 5 miles to church. And I'm going to make up some time with the accelerator. Foolish notion, right? So I'm speeding, and at about the 1 mile mark, a group of birds comes off the left-hand side of the road, 4 or 5 sparrow size, and they're flying from the vehicle such I had to jump on a brake to keep from hitting them. They passed, and I sped back up. And a little bit further down the road, the same thing happened, another group of birds. And then my mental marker of 3 miles, I know this happened at least 3 times, and I think it happened 4. And, I'm still focused on what I have to do at my destination, so I guess I'm supposed to go the speed limit. I didn't really process this. So I get down to about the 6 mile mark. I've looked at this now on Google. I can tell you where those are. And it's out in the country. There's cornfields. It's a quarter mile between the houses. I can speed back up. Another group of birds. Well, I don't know about you, but that was past my coincidence threshold. I slowed way down. what's happening here? This has never happened to me once, let alone the series of connected events. I get to the stop sign, I turn right, and I'm going up the road, and about the 1 mile mark, I look up ahead, and there's a car off the road to the right. It's flipped over on its, totally flipped over. The hood's in the yard, and the shoulder's a little higher than the yard, and the trunk is turned in my direction, and the rear wheels are still spinning. And so time slowed down. I'm taking all this information in, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not first responder trained. I wouldn't carry one of those new fancy gadgets, cell phone things, you know. There's two white vans pulled over to the left, and the drivers are getting out of the doors. In the house next to where the car's turned over, there's somebody coming out the front door of the house. So I made that decision that I really didn't have anything to contribute, and frankly, I was in shock. I pulled over to the left and went slowly by. And so what do you do with that? I know what happened. I thought, well, I just wasn't meant to be either in an accident or on the site involved with that. But then wait a minute. The activity of those birds was well in advance of events that later unfolded, the timing of the accident. It was precognitive. So, I mean, again, there's no way to look at the world in the same way. So I've come to link those things up and say, what eventually that has brought me to be involved with this organization, the International Association for Near-Death Study, for almost 25 years now, is things that I was led to give me a wider, broader perspective that contributes to that activity. And I call it the stage group. This is a stage, life is a play, and it's a magnificent thing that we're all a part of that and connected in that way. And that we can really relax and rely on that. And that change called death is nothing more than a transition. It goes on. As Oliver Wendell Holmes says about these eye-opening events, a mind stretched by a new idea can never return to its original dimensions. Thank you.